So we're going to start with our webinar today. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today for the Mentoring Program 2020 webinar. My name is Beatriz Estrada. I am from Mexico, but I'm working here in Peru as part of the ICER Secretariat. I'm going to be the moderator and the timekeeper for today's webinar. And I just want to give you some insights of what we're going to discuss today. So this webinar marks the start of our mentoring program of 2020. This is an initiative of the International Confederation of Energy Regulators, but basically of the Women in Energy initiative. This is the 7th mentoring program that we have since we created the initiative. This is a 12-month program, starting on March 2020 and ending on February 2021. The idea is always to run this webinar and start it when we commemorate the International Women's Day. If you have any chance to follow us in our social networks, you'll see that we have posted different contents commemorating the importance of women in the economic and political life, but mostly on the energy sector, which is the sector in which we develop professionally. So today's webinar is intended to explain what is the program about, and we're going to talk about the mentors, the mentoring relationships and experiences. For this purpose, we have invited some key persons, and we're very happy to have them today. They are former mentors and former mentees, and they will be sharing some insights with us. So I'm going to introduce you to the different speakers that we have today. The first one is Commissioner Alison Jean. She is the CEO of the National Utilities Regulatory Commission of St. Lucia, and she's live from Castries. We also have Natalie McCoy. She's the head of the international affairs of the Portuguese regulator, and she's been working for a long time with ICER, and she's a very experienced mentor, and she's live from Lisbon. And we also have Gustavo Becerra, which is the legal energy specialist here in the Peruvian regulator. And last year, he became an ICER mentor, and he liked very much the experience, and he's repeating this time. So this mentoring program is like no other. It has a global scope and a broad range of mentors from junior staff, but also from a commissioner level, which is very interesting because it also provides great tools for participants to share within the program and outside the program, helping them to foster and develop a professional career in the energy sector. So we have the mentoring journal, we have these webinars, and we have many other platforms that can be useful to achieve the best results for the program. So the structure and how the audience can participate. We're going to ask each of our speakers to give some insights on their experiences as mentors or mentees. They will also have some time for questions. I'm going to be addressing some initial questions, but in case anyone has additional questions, you can just write a private message on the chat or a message to everyone, and we'll be writing down the different questions, and we're going to share them with the rest of the audience. So we want this webinar to be very informative and productive for you. So please provide your questions. I mean, maybe while they're speaking on the chat or initially, however you prefer, we're going to keep a record on those. And we will also address as many possible questions at the end of the webinar, probably the last 15 minutes. So everyone is going to have a chance to make some questions. And we're going to record this webinar. So there are many other mentees or mentors that weren't able to join us today because of the time schedule. So we're going to have these materials available in case you want to share it with them or people that couldn't be a part of today's meeting. They're going to have the opportunity to watch this video. Okay, so starting with the mentoring program, we pair mentors and mentees from all around the world. This year we have 30 pairs of mentors and mentees from 22 different countries. 8 of our mentors are at the commissioner level, which is very nice. I mean, in terms of people that are developing careers in the energy sector to have a mentor, you know, on the very top. And The most important thing is that this program does not set a standard formula for all mentees to follow. We know there are differences in terms of cultural relationships, and that every relationship is unique, and the mentors and mentees decide what do they want to take out from this mentoring relationship. So we provide a lot of resources for the mentoring relationship to thrive, but we also have to take into consideration that the way that every mentor and mentee work is different. So we shared an overview document that explains the role of the mentor and mentee. The most important part is the relationship build trust. That is why it's important to sign the agreements and establish ground rules in the very beginning. According to the frequency of the contact, what do you expect as mentors and mentees, how you will meet, the technology that you will use. And the most important part is people to be aware that this relationship is, everyone is responsible for this relationship, and to take the most of it. So please contact your mentors and your mentees and take the most of this opportunity that we are offering as a liaison point to get to know people from all over the world and share experiences in this regard. So we will contact you in April to make sure that your mentor has already written you. If for some reason you haven't had contact with your mentor, or something is not working, please contact the Secretariat and we'll help you with that. Keep a mentoring journal with key dates to help you plan and record the different actions. And at the very end of the program, please give us your feedback, as it helps us every year to improve it. Mentors take the responsibility of mentoring and guiding very seriously. So thank you very much for helping us to make the most of this program. So we have a lot of resources that we have already shared. You can visit the ICER website. The ICER website, you're going to find the overview, some testimonials. You're going to find the Women in Energy stories. These are real life stories that have helped us see potential plans that we have not maybe considered at the very beginning of our program. And so the activities are there, the materials are there, and the idea of this webinar is just to share some experiences from people that have been part of the mentoring program. So I'm gonna pass the floor to Commissioner Allison. I'm very happy to have her here, and so we're gonna start with her, if you agree. So I'm gonna pass the floor to Allison.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our mentorship program for 2020. I'm happy to be part of this webinar and look forward to serving as a mentor over this year. I would start off by letting you know a little about me. I had a public service career of about 30 years, where I left the public service at the position of permanent secretary, which is the highest. In some jurisdictions it's called CEO, but in our case, in the Caribbean, it's referred to as permanent secretary. And I spent a number of years, perhaps about 10 years, in the Department of Infrastructure and Energy. So I had to interface with a lot of issues relating to energy. And at that time, we were just developing the energy sector with the emergence of renewable energy. So it was quite an exciting time. However, I retired in the public service very early, and I took up the position as executive director of the Caribbean Electric Utility Services Corporation, which is a private sector organization with which is an association of all the electric utility companies in the Caribbean, and there are associate members which are either utility providers of products and services. Now I am the Chief Executive Officer of the NERC. So I consider myself to have had several roles within the energy sector. The role of government, the role of the private sector, and the role now of the regulator. So I feel quite comfortable within the energy sector, although I am not an engineer. So I still have to grapple with some of the technical issues within the sector, but I have had varied experience in that sector, and I can look at things from various perspectives. I can look at the energy sector from various perspectives, from the perspective of government, from the perspective of the utility, and now from the perspective of the regulator. I find the energy sector in St. Lucia and in the Caribbean, by extension, to be evolving and growing, because for many years, our generation was done solely using fossil fuels. But now, given the issues of climate change, as well as the volatility of the oil sector, we're seeing the emergence of renewable energy as an alternative to generation. In St. Lucia, for now, our generation is done primarily from diesel, and we have just about 1% of renewable energy using solar. However, from the regulatory standpoint, we are adjusting our legislation to be able to attract much more generation using wind and solar. And there is also discussions on the possibility of geothermal exploration. The government of St. Lucia, together with the utility, commissioned a national energy transition strategy, and that strategy sought to arrive at the optimal or least cost solution to energy generation. So the outcome of that strategy showed that it would be most cost effective to utilize the existing utility as the dominant provider for generation with various percentages of solar and wind and geothermal, but at a good price, at the best possible price. If St. Lucia is successful in geothermal, we ought to be able to get our base load out of geothermal. So if that happens, then our dependence on fossil fuels will be less. So although I came into the National Utilities Regulatory Commission in January of 2019. So I still consider myself an amateur. However, with the experience that I've gathered, I am able to maneuver and navigate my way to lead this organization. The NERC consists of a secretariat with a team of 7. And I'm sure you would be happy to know that all the staff of the secretariat are women. So we have the 8 of us. I lead a team of myself plus 7. And on the other hand, I am supported by a commission of 7 as well, but 6 men and 1 woman. So that causes the balance, the gender balance. We have a very bright and energetic team of women, and they provide the guidance and recommendations to the commission. So that's, for me, my introduction. Beatrice, I would stop here and I would await your further questions.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you for giving us this brief introduction. If anyone wants to raise some questions, please do it by the chat privately or the chat to everyone. But I do have some questions I would like to ask you. First of all, it's very encouraging to see a female commissioner leading such an important institution in a country. So congratulations. And this is very significant for women in the energy sector. You have made it already to the top. You're the CEO. So what is the best advice that you could give to give us, to help plan a career rather than simply work to keep a job?
Yes. Thank you, Beatrice. That's a very good question. When I started off my career, I decided to start off as a generalist because when you're young, you have not yet determined exactly what you want to get into. So I did a bachelor's degree in management. Out of that bachelor's degree, I particularly honed in on issues on the subjects of human resource management, of project management, of international business, and of business law. So these were areas that I thought would be able to land me not only at the managerial level, but would give me an opportunity to scope the sectors and see which ones that I would be able to fit in. So human resource management, about dealing with people; project management, about the whole coordination of projects; international business, just in case that I wanted to go into the private sector; and law, because I believe law cuts across, business law, because it cuts across all these sectors. So at that point, I returned to the public service after I completed my degree, but then I did a master's in business administration. So again, that business administration was general, which gave me an opportunity to deepen my studies on the very same courses, project management, but it went further to strategic management and other courses. So it was out of these two qualifications on one side that I was able to find my niche in more into strategic management. So I branched out completely out of human resource management and focused primarily on project management and on strategic management. And I believe that is how I landed in the infrastructure sector, because I became a project management professional. I did the PMP program and continued to go through several infrastructure related small courses in order for me to have a better understanding of that sector. So my advice to the young people who are coming up is to carve out your career. I would not advise that you specialize too early, because sometimes you may choose an area at the early stage, and afterwards you recognize either there's a dearth of positions of what you've qualified for, and therefore you might not be able to get the right job, or that you get bored afterwards and it takes a little while to get yourself out of that career that you've specialized in. So that, in a nutshell, would be my advice to young people who are coming into careers.
And just a last question before we move with Gustavo, which is you were a mentee yourself. So do you have any tips or any advice that you would like to give some mentees of this new generation of the program? How can they take the most or make the most of this experience?
Yes, thanks for that question. I was really privileged to have a very good mentor last year in the name of Colleen Honorable, Colette Honorable. I found that the two of us were paired beautifully because she is an attorney and she was able to assist me in some regulatory matters. She was able to point me to several resources that assisted in my decision making. So my advice to the mentees who are coming right now is, regardless of your knowledge and expertise, be open to advice. For me, although I had a lot of experience in the energy sector, in infrastructure, in government, I was green. I considered myself green to the regulatory sector. So I was quite open to listening to Colette, and taking the advice that she had given. The other aspect is contact your mentor when you have issues that you're grappling with, if you need assistance in going through a decision, how you analyze it, what you need to do. Use your mentor as a resource. It's a good avenue for hand-holding during that process. Don't be afraid to ask questions and to get everything that you can out of this mentorship program, because it's a valid resource for women in energy as well as women who are in the regulatory sector.
So if you agree, Natalie, we would move forward with you until Gustavo makes some technical adjustments. So okay, let's go with Natalie.
Yeah, sure, of course. Gustavo, are you still working? Yeah, okay, so we can hear him. Very good. Well, I suppose it's, in a way, it's kind of destiny that's just jumped in here, because the last advice that Allison was just commenting about, how to, in practice, how to interact with your mentor, that's very much what I wanted to talk about. In terms of, we've seen the theory, you've explained the basics, we have these papers, but how does it all really work? And how can we do this in reality with strangers and people halfway across the world? Because it does sound a little bit alien, a bit daunting, of how it can, something like this that's virtual and from such different backgrounds, how can we connect with somebody? But I can tell you it does work. And I've had several very good experiences through this mentoring program. And I'm still in touch with two people that I was paired with. So I think it is a testimony to a very unique program that you can really get some added value and some life learning, even career learning, both for the mentor and the mentee. So perhaps looking at these practical aspects, question about how to get started and how does it work. And I can say perhaps there are two key rules, not rules, but two key factors. Do use the resources that are there. there is help, and it really is quite practical and applicable. So you have the program overview, you have a mentoring journal, then there's the best books and broadcasts and blogs. It's a very good list of different materials that you can read and check out, and of course the list of what to talk about, because that's kind of the toughest thing is where to start and how do I launch into issues, and which issues should I even go into with this stranger. So I think those are very useful resources, and you can use them at the beginning and throughout. So that's important to keep in mind, that they can really be a support at any point during the whole year that you're together with the mentor. The other most important thing I would say is and you mentioned it at the beginning, Beatriz, is to remember the nature of the relationship and the fact that it's a one-on-one, it's very personal, and you're trying to create a safe space, initially with a stranger, but over time with somebody who gets to know you very well. And it's a mutual relationship, so you both have to feel able to speak frankly, to be honest with each other, to share personal experiences, doubts, or professional kind of, as Allison was saying, in some cases we're ignorant of an issue and ask somebody else for advice or learn about the topic. And there's no shame or fear of sharing those kind of things, especially in this special mentoring kind of relationship. So I think those are maybe the backdrop for the mentoring program. Maybe in terms of some basic ground rules, how to manage day to day during the program. First thing I would say is to don't stand up your date. Make sure that if you schedule a call or an appointment, a video chat, that you stick to it, and that if someone is waiting for you on the other end of the line, that you're there to answer it. But of course, things happen. You have a conflict, then you can advise in good time. But try to keep the appointments that you make, and it's also a good rhythm as well to keep the relationship going. The other thing that I think helps a lot is before each of these chats, make sure that you prepare, or at the very least that you go over what you talked about last time. In this sense, keeping the journal, it sounds geeky, but keeping the journal is invaluable, just to remind you what you talked about, what was it that she was saying, and what was that document she told me to go look at, okay? And so it helps you really to catch your bearings again before you dive back in after some time apart from each other. I think also for the mentors, I think it's very important to remember that it's a two-way street. It's not a lecture. It's not a how-to. You have all the answers so you can pontificate and expound without dialogue. So it's very important for it to be a discussion and a chat, and to maintain the informal nature with the other person on both sides. I think that's important as well, to remember. You get what you put into it. So you also have to make some effort as a mentee, but also as a mentor. And for the mentors, I think the most important thing, it's very tempting to give advice and to kind of coach somebody, tell them what you think they should do. I guess in a way, it's a little bit like some therapy sessions where they're trying to get you to think about what you should do. And so to bring out your analysis of your own situation, and to really try to understand where you're coming from by speaking about it, but maybe opening some questions and giving you some ideas without necessarily directing your next steps in your life for you. So I think that's important for mentors, that we remember that we don't necessarily have all the answers. The most we can do is try to talk about the issues themselves and bring out options and things for the mentee to think about themselves. Things that really come to mind in terms of the practicalities is the mentoring agreement. And that's, I think, very useful for when you first start, make contact the first time. So it's all very nice to talk about manners in relationships and how we should interact, but how do you actually get on with doing it? What do you say during the first phone call? A good place to start is to use the structures that are there, to use the materials as a script, if you will, to help launch yourselves into this new program. And that starts with this mentoring agreement. And I think it has a list of the issues that you might discuss. No, those are in, I think those are in the mentees application, sorry. Issues that you might discuss from the mentees applications, their top priorities, what topics they're interested in, and then the mentoring agreement where you can decide between you what areas you will be focusing on. I think that's a very useful way to just hash out some, not formalities, but some of the topics and the structure of the relationship. Some people want more about technical regulation. Other people want more career advice, how to grow into a certain professional area. Some people want more about the life-work balance and how to manage also interpersonal relationships in the office. It just depends what your priorities are. And then that you can already identify those as the mentee and let your mentor know that those are things that you're interested in doing while you're together for the whole year. Another important thing to use and take advantage of is the list of articles, for the blogs and the broadcasts. That sheet is actually really quite fun. Some of the TED Talks or some of the articles you can find on there, they really are a good way to jumpstart a conversation and bring to life maybe a personal experience. So I think that's also very useful. And if you have other ones that aren't on that list, I'm sure the secretary would be very grateful to receive them. But certainly in a couple of my mentoring experiences, we use those as a basis for our debates and different phone calls that we had. Kind of gave ourselves the homework of, before our next chat, watch this one, this TED Talk or that video, and then we came back and talked about it, and it reminded us of real life situations that we've been in, and so then it got us talking. So that was also very useful as a way to kind of feed our exchanges. So I think that's one particularly useful tip. Perhaps one last thing I could recommend is to book in advance. So depending on your availability, you could meet every 5 weeks, every 6 weeks. But if you set up the rhythm in advance and you even book, say, a block or 3 or 4 in advance, then you know when's the next time is my call, when I should be reading things or watching a video, and you can prepare slowly but surely. But you also have kind of not a deadline, but it motivates you to work towards the next call and to be ready for the next chat. And sometimes you might want to get in touch in between that. And I know my last mentoring partnership, that's exactly what would happen. There would be a promotion or an advertisement at the mentees organization, and so she would want to discuss, oh, well, this has come up, the deadline is next week, and what should I do, and what do you think? And I was thinking that, and my CV. So if there's a need, or if there's something not pressing, but something that comes up that you want to discuss in between your calls, then don't be afraid to make contact. And I think Allison mentioned that as well. And that's also very, very useful. And it definitely makes it even I guess not intimacy, but the relationship even stronger. And if you have that possibility to exchange when real life things are happening that are relevant, and you have a safe space. I think that's the one thing I most appreciated, was the fact that it's, maybe because it's international, it's a bubble, and it's outside of your direct work environment. So you can talk about the boss, and you can talk about the guy in the office across the hallway, and you can talk about, I would like to leave early to go to my swimming lessons. How can I manage? So there's things you can discuss that maybe you wouldn't do directly with a colleague because it becomes awkward, those kind of things. The fact that somebody's 4,000 miles away does make that a little bit easier, and you can be completely at ease to a certain extent in sharing more about this. So I think from my side, those would be the more practical aspects of participating in the mentoring, but if there's anything else I can share, then very happy to.
Thank you very much for such a comprehensive presentation, Natalie. But I was willing to ask you something, Natalie. As you've been an experienced mentor before, I don't know if you could share some, particular story or something about, because I know that you when you're a mentor, you create more than you make a relationship with another person. I mean, this program takes 1 year. So I don't know if there is any story that you would like to share with us about any former mentee that you had, or or something, you know, in this line?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. In fact, I'm now, I suppose we're all aware of this virus issue and travel restrictions, and it's affecting many of us. But one of my former mentees is supposed to be coming. I'm in Portugal, and she's supposed to be traveling and doing the Camino de Santiago soon. And so hopefully going to meet up when she finally gets to Portugal on her way to Santiago de Compostela. So you do stay in touch with people in the strangest ways and from very different parts of the world and backgrounds. So that's been very nice to be able to maintain those links. And for example, with her case, it was 2 years ago that we had our mentoring year together. And last year she got a promotion and we hadn't been in touch for a little while. And she right away sent me a message and I'm doing this now. And so she was very pleased. And she wanted to share that all those discussions that we've been having, and she'd applied for different things while we were mentoring together. And finally, this is the one that went forward for her. So she was very pleased, and she wanted to share that. And I thought that was very nice to have that kind of feedback later on, and to know that, you know, people's lives continue, and that they, in some ways, they take what they get out of the relationship and they remember it enough to, you know, when something relevant happens and work, as it was in this case, they want to tell you about it. So that was actually quite kind of sweet, I suppose, is the word. But you certainly do get all kinds of, and you learn a lot. The first mentor I worked with, she was very eager, and she read a lot of the self-help career-wise books, and she put me to work, I'll tell you. And I had to read all of these books so that we could have these discussions, and it does give you food for thought, and suddenly you're thinking about things differently because somebody's written in a book. And it was a completely different way of looking at some of the issues. But she gave us the homework, and we both had to do it, and then we talked about it quite seriously. And that's also been enriching, I guess, for me, to be able to have that exchange and to force me to think about things differently, and to out of my comfort zone to go and look at material that I wouldn't necessarily have bothered to pick up on my own.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. I think we have Gustavo now. Okay, ya te escuchamos, Gustavo. So you have to switch to English, Gustavo. So here in Latin America, we solve things in imaginable ways. So okay, Gustavo, go ahead.
Okay. Good for everyone. It's an honor for me to be a part of this meeting and briefly share my experience in the Woman in Energy Mentoring Program. One of the first things to do while getting to know your mentee or mentor is to establish with her immediate environment. That includes getting to know their country's strengths and weakness. For example, on matters regarding energy regulation, policies, and laws, social and economic problems, etc. After that, you can develop a strategy to share some insights that can help your mentee excel with the knowledge you've acquired through the years, and with the policies that are applied within your own country. For example, my previous mentee and I compared the different situations and solutions regarding the smuggling of hydrocarbons. In her country, Mexico, food was smuggled from the oil pipelines, so an additive colorant was used to trace the molecule. In Peru, for example, we use pipelines to transport raw oil. This comparison enriched our solution capacity. Feedback is crucial. Remember that as a mentor, you should have an open mind when listening to your mentee national context. If you are a mentee, don't be afraid to share your knowledge with your mentor. I also managed to share with my mentee some graphics on academics materials, PowerPoints, lectures, etc., that I had regulate through the years. It's a briefly way to share my experience. Definitely is you can find very rich in the share in the interchange the experience and all the tools for the supervision or of hydrocarbons, no, in my case. And it's a great opportunity to improvement the knowledge and the experience in the energy area, no?
Okay, Gustavo, thank you very much. I'm gonna keep you on the phone right here next to the camera. And I'm gonna move to some of the questions because we have already received one question for Natalie. So they're asking for Natalie's background information. I guess they're asking for your studies or what you've done before. And I just have to say something because I'm a personal fan of Natalie because she speaks like 1,000 million languages and she speaks it beautifully and fluently. So she's quite a role model. So that's why people want to know a little bit more about her background. So I'm gonna pass the word to Natalie to share some of that with us.
Well, language
Es para él. Yeah, pásale a Natalie. Yeah. Okay, Natalie, there you go.
I'm not sure I can speak now after that, if I'm honest. I'm totally, I don't know if you can see the blush from here, but thanks, you're really too much, Beatriz. Right, so my background, I suppose you don't mean where I grew up and things like that. That's a whole nother webinar, more time. But my background is actually in foreign affairs. So I did politics and I started professionally in the European Parliament, which is in Brussels, which is politics. And from there got into energy issues and then moved into energy regulators, starting with as well, some of you may be familiar, the Association of European Energy Regulators, CEER, and they're members of ICER, they're active members also of the Women in Energy initiative. So that's also where I started, I guess, my involvement with the WIE program. So really, it was just a jump to one of the national regulators, the one here in Portugal. And so it's a very small, simple story, but indeed a European kind of experience.
I have a question for Gustavo. Wait, I'm gonna put you here, Gustavo. So I have a question for you. So you are our only male participant today as a speaker. So I would like to ask you how being a mentor has helped you in your professional career. I mean, in terms of knowledge, technical knowledge, as you mentioned, with the relationship of this lady of Mexico, but also in terms of intercultural communication. I mean, how has this been helpful for you professionally and personally?
Yeah. The experience as a mentor has been very enriching, both for the academic and political partner information, as well as for the experience acquired as a mentor. It allowed me to identify opportunities for improvement that could be applied in my national regulator, as you know me, based on emblematic cases that we are exchanging. I made available to my mentor the information that I consider most relevant from the problem that I could identify in her country, Mexico, for which it was vital to establish adequate communication.
Great. Thank you, Gustavo. So we have another question here. So it's I mean, this question maybe for Commissioner Allison, which is what pointers can you give to mentors and mentees about having a mentor or a mentee from different regions and cultures? This is in the line of the question that I addressed to Gustavo. So Commissioner Allison, could you just help us with some insights on that?
Yes, I think that's the beauty of our mentorship program because it cuts across various borders. I think it is important to learn the various differences that we have from different countries. So I would advise that our mentors and mentees come from different regions so that we can learn from the experiences of each other. One caveat that I have, though, is be very mindful of the legislative framework of the various regions because not everyone has the same laws. So in the regulatory sector, we regulate based on the legislative framework. However, we can draw from mentors and mentees the various approaches that can be used to solve problems. So that would be my advice to mentors that to mentees, sorry, that you shouldn't be afraid or feel concerned if your mentor is from a different region as yourself.
I could ask Natalie also to give us some insights on that question, if you have anything to add, Natalie.
I think Allison is absolutely right. It's very big, actually. It's not a challenge, even an advantage, because you do get different solutions and options, experiences, and different approaches that, you know how it works in your own country or in your own professional environment, the work culture where you live, that you're familiar with it. And sometimes we're also stuck in it. And the possibility of someone saying, well, where I'm from, we do it this way, and it's a little bit different. And actually, maybe it's useful for you to, in a way, think outside the box. I think actually that's invaluable. And it's certainly, well, something I live with every day, living in Portugal and and working with colleagues from all over Europe and ICER as well, for example. So really, you can get a lot from the differences, and you can even integrate them and not plagiarize, but take advantage of the things you can find out from other sources. I mean, the more practical issue of the mentoring is, of course, the time difference. So that's I had one mentorship relationship was with Australia, so we always had a bit of a challenge in finding a time to chat to each other, but we managed, and it worked okay. It was like 10 o'clock at night in one house and 10 o'clock in the morning in the other, but we somehow still shared a cup of tea while we chatted, even though we're completely different days and times. But I think the important thing is to be sensitive to that as well, to the differences, but try to get the most out of them, because it's really the opportunity of getting something new from those people's different perspectives.
Well, I think that actually answers a question that we received. It was, how did they manage the time differences in managing a good mentoring relationship, and the advice is that you could even have a cup of tea. So I think it went well, thank you. So I'm going to be closing the webinar today with some ideas and some piece of advice. So basically, if you have any trouble, I mean, we're going to contact you in April to see how everything is going, if it's moving smoothly or not. And if you have any comments, just please write to the ICER Secretariat. Even though if there's a problem with the communication with your mentor or your mentee, any sort of situation, we will help you solve it. And just to close and wrap up, I would just like to take some key ideas that I got from the conversation today. First of all is to be open to advice. You can also use your mentor and your mentee to solve different issues, basically because this intercultural communication can help you think outside the box. So it's a challenge, but it's also an advantage. So take the advantage of this new relationship that you're building with someone outside. your secure zone. So this is also a two-way street situation in which it shouldn't be a lecture of mentors, but also a way in which mentors and mentees can learn from each other. So don't be afraid as mentees to share also the knowledge that you have, personal, professional, technical, any sort of thing, because this is a trust building relationship to enrich both parts. Look also for your priorities, even though there are technical, regulation, life balance, professional advice, and set this list to talk to your mentor before you start the relationship. And also take advantage of this rich cultural experience. I think one of the keys that Commissioner Allison mentioned is that even though this is a mentoring program, of course, most of people being a mentee want to take the most of a comparison relationship in terms of international advice, of best practices to excel in everything that we do back home. So this comparison of the legislative frameworks is very important, because the way that we issue regulation in most cases is through benchmarks. So if you have the opportunity to talk firsthand with someone that is, creating regulation with a very particular context, maybe you can think and discuss, things that might be helpful for your country as well. So I wish you all the very best starting with this mentorship program 20 at 20. We encourage you to be proactively engaged in the network of women in energy. It's not just this mentoring initiative. Follow us on our social networks, share some content, and also share with us your impressions, your feedback, and everything that you can, so we can make this program more useful for you. Our social network is at ICER Woman, so you can find us on Twitter. We've been launching some content on the International Women's Day, related in terms of the energy sector. We offer webinars, so if you have an idea also for a future webinar, let us know. And one of the things that Una shared with me in some of the lines that I'm sharing with you is that be proud to say that you're a mentee. And I think that's a very important thing, a mentor or a mentee, because you are encouraging other people to be, maybe not through this platform, but in their everyday lives, this mission, to help someone grow and develop in the professional career. So it's a real statement that will help other people ask for advice. And the best way to help us is to share with everyone surrounding you what is it that you're doing in this mentoring program. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating today. We're coming from very different regions of the world, and it is always very challenging, but also encouraging to meet people from Portugal, from Eswatini, from Zambia, from so many places of the world. And I'm sure this relationship and these contacts will help us, excel in everything that we do professionally and personally, because this is the richness of diversity. So stay in contact. Any other situation, we can solve it via email. And thank you very much for everyone that joined us today. We're gonna upload this record webinar to our ICER website in case you want to share it. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you soon.